The bright morning sun poured through the glass walls of the towering headquarters of Sterling Timeworks, turning every polished surface into a mirror. Employees hurried through the lobby carrying files, laptops, and cups of coffee, each of them moving with purpose as the company prepared for the most important investor presentation in its history. Yet among the crowd stood one man who seemed almost invisible. 36-year-old Elias Rowan wore a clean but faded blue work shirt, carefully pressed trousers, and carried a worn leather toolbox that had belonged to his late father. Hanging beside the toolbox was a small wooden sign he had carved by hand. The words were simple, painted with careful strokes that had begun to fade from years of use: "Single Dad Watch Repair, every second matters." The sign had followed him through countless repair jobs, reminding people not only of his profession but of the little daughter waiting for him at home. What happened that morning because of that sign would change two families forever. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet heroes who never give up, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Tales Journey. Your support helps bring more emotional stories like this to people around the world, and your encouragement means more than you know. Elias had never imagined that life would become so difficult. 5 years earlier he had been happily married, spending weekends restoring antique clocks while his wife laughed beside him and their tiny daughter, Ivy, crawled across the workshop floor collecting tiny gears that had fallen onto the rug. Then illness arrived without warning and stole everything from him except the little girl who still believed her father could fix anything. Since then, every sunrise began with preparing breakfast, braiding Ivy's hair the best he could, walking her to school, and then searching for enough repair work to keep food on the table. His handmade sign was not meant to attract sympathy. It was simply a promise that every customer who trusted him was helping a father keep his daughter smiling. That same morning, 32-year-old CEO Vanessa Harrington entered the building surrounded by executives and assistants. Brilliant, ambitious, and admired across the business world, she believed professionalism was measured by flawless appearances. She noticed Elias immediately. Her eyes stopped on the handmade sign hanging beside his toolbox. In front of several employees, she quietly instructed security that such personal displays looked unprofessional inside her company headquarters. She believed clients expected perfection, not emotional stories written on wooden boards. Elias heard every word. His face remained calm, but inside, another small piece of his confidence quietly broke. Without arguing, he gently removed the sign and placed it inside his toolbox. Years of hardship had taught him that dignity was sometimes stronger than pride. He had only been hired that day because Sterling Timeworks owned an antique grandfather clock displayed in the executive lobby. The priceless clock had suddenly stopped working, and every famous restoration expert had either retired or declined the urgent request. Someone finally recommended Elias, saying that although he worked from a tiny neighborhood workshop, his hands possessed remarkable patience with old mechanisms. Vanessa had agreed reluctantly, expecting little more than an ordinary repairman. As Elias carefully opened the clock, his movements became almost graceful. Every tiny spring, gear, and jewel bearing was handled with respect as though each piece carried a memory. Several curious employees paused to watch him work. Some had never seen anyone repair a mechanical masterpiece without modern machines. His fingers moved slowly, guided by experience earned through thousands of quiet afternoons restoring forgotten family treasures. Halfway through the repair, the atmosphere inside the building suddenly changed. Vanessa received an urgent phone call that caused all color to leave her face. Her beloved grandmother, Eleanor Harrington, had collapsed at home. Though doctors assured everyone she was stable, Eleanor refused to calm down because she believed she had lost something far more precious than her health. Her treasured pocket watch, the final gift from her late husband nearly 70 years earlier, had stopped working that morning. The elderly woman insisted that if the watch could not be repaired, she would lose the last heartbeat connecting her to the love of her life. Every luxury jeweler in the city had already examined the antique watch and declared it beyond repair. Tiny handmade parts no longer existed, and replacing the movement would destroy its historical value. Vanessa remembered seeing Elias working quietly downstairs. Desperation replaced pride. For the first time that day, she approached him not as a CEO speaking to a contractor but as a granddaughter frightened of disappointing the woman who had raised her. Elias listened carefully while Vanessa explained the situation. He quietly closed his toolbox, picked up his handmade sign again without saying a word, and followed her to Eleanor's beautiful countryside home bathed in warm afternoon sunlight. The peaceful garden outside was blooming with colorful flowers, and birds filled the air with gentle songs, making the home feel untouched by the pressure of the corporate world. Eleanor welcomed Elias with tired but kind eyes. Unlike everyone else, she immediately noticed the wooden sign hanging beside his toolbox. Instead of finding it unprofessional, she smiled softly. She understood what sacrifice looked like because decades earlier she had raised Vanessa's father alone after becoming a widow. She gently thanked Elias for being the kind of father who refused to give up, even when life became unbearably difficult. The pocket watch rested on a velvet cloth beside the window where bright daylight illuminated every scratch earned over generations. Elias examined it with extraordinary patience. The problem was not simply a broken spring. One tiny handmade wheel, thinner than a grain of rice, had cracked almost invisibly. No replacement existed anywhere in the world. Most people would have surrendered. Elias quietly opened a small wooden box inside his toolbox. Hidden beneath carefully organized tools were tiny handcrafted components he had spent years making during sleepless nights after Ivy had gone to bed. Using nothing more than precision files, miniature pliers, and steady hands, he began shaping an entirely new wheel from raw metal. Hours passed beneath the afternoon sun as silence filled the room. Every movement reflected love rather than urgency. Vanessa watched in disbelief. She had built billion-dollar companies by making rapid decisions, yet this man reminded her that some things could never be rushed. Memories, family, and craftsmanship demanded patience. Finally, Elias placed the final component inside the movement. He gently wound the watch. For one breathtaking moment, nothing happened. Then came a soft, familiar tick. Another followed. Then another. The tiny heartbeat of the watch returned after decades of faithful service. Eleanor closed her eyes as tears rolled gently down her cheeks. It was not simply a watch that had come back to life. It was 70 years of memories breathing once again. Vanessa felt something inside herself quietly change. She remembered the wooden sign she had dismissed only hours earlier. She realized that professionalism without compassion was empty. The sign had never been about gaining sympathy. It had represented responsibility, resilience, and unconditional love. Before Elias prepared to leave, Eleanor asked to see the sign once more. She carefully brushed her fingers across the carved letters and smiled. She said that every scratch on the wood reminded her that the strongest people rarely carried shiny titles. They carried invisible burdens while continuing to serve others with quiet grace. The following Monday morning, employees entering Sterling Timeworks stopped in surprise. Hanging proudly in the main reception area was a beautifully framed version of Elias's handmade sign. Beneath it was a bronze plaque reading, "True professionalism begins with character. Never judge a person's story before understanding the hands that carry it." Vanessa personally invited Elias to become the company's official heritage restoration consultant, allowing him flexible hours so he could always be present for Ivy. Instead of asking him to hide his identity as a single father, the company celebrated it. Other working parents throughout the organization finally felt seen and respected. Months later, Sterling Timeworks introduced scholarships for children being raised by single parents and partnered with local craftsmen to preserve traditional watchmaking skills. The initiative inspired countless businesses across the region to value humanity alongside achievement. The greatest reward, however, arrived one bright Saturday afternoon. Ivy visited the company with her father for Family Day. As she proudly walked through the lobby holding Elias's hand, she saw the framed sign displayed where every visitor could read it. She looked up at her father with shining eyes filled with pride. For years she had watched him leave home before sunrise carrying that weathered toolbox. Now the same sign that someone once called unprofessional had become a symbol of courage for hundreds of employees. If this story has touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Kindness Tales Journey. Your support helps these stories of hope, compassion, and second chances reach people who may need them the most. Special request: before this story ends, please leave a comment with the words, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe that compassion is always more valuable than appearances. As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass entrance, Elias and Ivy walked toward the parking lot hand in hand. The old toolbox still rested in his hand, and the wooden sign still swung gently beside it. Nothing about it had changed except the way the world now looked at it. Sometimes the hands that repair a broken watch also repair broken hearts. And sometimes the greatest lesson a powerful CEO can ever learn comes not from a boardroom, but from a single father who never stopped believing that every second, every act of kindness, and every sacrifice made for family truly matters.